Dabney Friedrich, a Trump appointee's courtroom, at least as it relates to Jan 6th, because she has blocked two convicted Jan 6 criminals, Brian Mock and Cindy Lou Young, from intervening in a case to make a mockery of it related to the placement of a memorial to those that gave their life and body and emotional aspects to protecting the Capitol on Jan 6th, meaning the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police, because Mock and Young wanted to intervene in order to rewrite the plaque or to put up another plaque to celebrate those who attacked the Capitol on Jan 6th, not on Dabney Friedrich's watch and not here on Legal AF. Michael Popok, let's talk about the lawsuit. It's been pending for a while, brought in 2025 by Harry Dunn, former Capitol Police officer in Daniel Hodges' Metropolitan Police Department, just to enforce the law passed by Congress in the wake of Jan 6th. You know, we know Donald Trump's busy trying to rewrite history about what happened. We have eyes and ears. We've seen the footage. We know what happened. And if we didn't know, all we have to do is listen to Officer Dunn and Officer Hodges about what happened that day. Play the clips.
January 6th has been a part of your life. I have those images of you in my mind of being at every single public hearing. Accountability matters to me. And accountability, I think, will bring healing. So I want to minimize January 6th and act like it is something we should get past. Don't think about it, minimize it. Normally I would, get angry, and I'm not going to argue with individuals anymore, especially over facts. I'm not going to continue ramming my head into this wall, expecting that wall to move.
I was beaten, crushed, kicked, punched, surrounded. Someone reached underneath my visor, tried to gouge out my eye. And all these people were just pardoned by Donald Trump, who says that they were the real victims, that they were the patriots. I don't understand how anyone can believe that. Donald Trump, everything he is, everything he stands for, is anathema to me. But he is President of the United States. And he's going to leverage that power in terrible ways. And one of the first ways he chose to do that was to pardon everyone until January 6th. Tried to stop the transfer of power, usurp the will. I hope that the guardrails that remain in our government are sufficient to preserve the republic the next 4 years. That would encourage everyone watching to look with fresh eyes on what Donald Trump is doing, what he's saying, and continually ask yourself, is this who you want to represent yourself? To your children, to everyone else in the world, to your neighbors, your friends, to your family? Because while he has been elected, those in Congress who enable him are still answerable to you. And they're afraid of losing their jobs precisely because too many people offer their unwavering support for Donald Trump. If you begin to think even a little bit that we can do better than Trump, then their support for him might waver too. He's not going to be able to ram through his horrific agenda quite as easily.
But Congress has been jerking around since they passed the law. The law, and it is a law, says that no less than 1 year after the date of the enactment of the act, the architect of the Capitol shall obtain an honorific plaque listing the names of all such officers and place the plaque at a permanent location on the western front of the United States Capitol. Why? Because that is the scene of some of the most violent medieval hand-to-hand combat on Jan 6th. In fact, just so we know who we're talking about, that's just been blocked by Judge Friedrich, Brian Mock was convicted in Judge Boasberg's courtroom of 6 felonies, including obstruction and assault on police officers, including with a flagpole used as a spear, and 5 misdemeanors. Cindy Lou Young was convicted of 4 misdemeanors. Here's how it's described in Judge Friedrich's order on page 2. Mock was convicted after a bench trial in front of Judge Boasberg on 4 counts of assaulting, resisting, or impeding officers, 1 count of civil disorder, 1 count of theft of government property, 1 count of entering and remaining in a restricted building with a deadly or dangerous weapon, and also engaging in physical violence in a restricted building with a deadly or dangerous weapon, and 1 count of committing an act of physical violence in the Capitol grounds or buildings. He was sentenced to 33 months in prison. Young was convicted by a jury on 1 count of entering and remaining in a restricted building, 1 count of disorderly and disruptive conduct, and 1 count of violent
What's up,
entry,
Saggle?
and
Or
1
Seagull,
count of
Saggle?
parading, demonstrating, and picketing.
Thank you for the like. I
building.
appreciate
She
it.
was sentenced to 4 months in prison.
What's up, everybody?
Now, Cindy Lou Young stirred up a little bit of a ruckus because after Donald Trump was elected again, she wanted permission to go back to the Capitol and go to his inauguration. And the Biden Department of Justice moved to block it.
You
as
are
part
the
of her
one.
conditions
Thank
of her
you.
release,
I appreciate it.
she was not allowed to go back to the Capitol. That's how dangerous of an unsavory of a character we're dealing with there. So Judge Friedrich had in front of her motions to intervene. A little teachable moment. It's when you're not a party to a case, but you claim you have some sort of injury unique to you, a cognizable injury, and therefore you have the right to intervene and be heard in the case. If you don't have that, then you don't have what's called standing. And if you don't have standing, you don't get into a case. Otherwise, you're just a drive-by stranger to a case. Everybody, I think that case is interesting. I think I'll try to intervene in it so I can be a party. No, that's not how that works. Not under the Article 3 and under the powers of a federal judge. Has to have parties that have injury in front of them so that it's not a advisory opinion, that there's a real live dispute in front of them, and they do it by way of a standing analysis. The only injury that we heard these 2 yahoos claim is that, oh, their reputations will be harmed. They have some sort of stigma attached to their participation in Jan 6, and this a plaque will only add to the public stigma. And the judge said, look, this is a plaque honoring the fallen and those that protected our Capitol. It's not selective recognition. It doesn't tie directly to any injury that you're alleging to you yourself. You know, you want to go put up your own sign or plaque somewhere, you go lobby and have a sign or plaque put on. But otherwise, I don't see that you have standing and social isolation and stigmatization. Sorry about that. Of being a Jan 6 defendant, and verbal attacks and harassment against you is not going to be cleared up because there's a plaque honoring those that protected our Capitol. This is, again, the world turned upside down. There's just a license to file these types of motions, a permission slip granted by Donald Trump, as we know. And this is what happens when you pardon 1,600 people on your first day in office. You're going to get them committing other crimes, which has already happened. You're going to get the attempted pipe bomber of the Democratic and Republican National Committee offices the day before Jan 6. You're going to get him to argue that he was pardoned as well, that Donald Trump blanket pardoned all people, even if he didn't name them, in the way that he handled his pardon. I don't know about this attack on Joe Biden and the use of an auto pen, but certainly the loose language used by Donald Trump to pardon everybody has given a little bit of comfort and a defense to the pipe bomber. So when all that happens, of course, we're going to get a convicted felon who used a flagpole as a spear against the police that day. Of course, we're going to get him to intervene and say, oh, what a snowflake, by the way. Both sides. There were good people on both sides. Remember when Donald Trump said that about the march in West Virginia that led by the KKK and white supremacists chanting Nazi slogans, and which led to the death of at least one person, a paralegal, who was run over intentionally by one of the protesters. Remember Donald Trump? There's good people on both sides. Play the clip.
Excuse me. What about the alt left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt right? Do they have any semblance of guilt? What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hand, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. I watched this very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week? And is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
And I'm here to tell you there isn't. And so I believe is the Trump appointee from the first term, Dabney Friedrich, saying the exact same thing. And let's get down to the merits of this case. There's a violation of the law. There is no, at this moment, plaque that has the names of all of the Met and Capitol Police on it, and there should be. Even the plaque that was generated, that they're sort of fighting over now, doesn't have all the names. Yes, I want it up on the building, and I want it up at the West Terrace, which even is where Brian Mock fought, this convicted felon. I want that, but as a placeholder. But there needs to be compliance with the law, and we all should have standing to argue that we're all lesser because of the violation of this law. And I assure you and those in our audience that when the Democrats get back the House and the Senate, this plaque will be going up. It will not be forgotten. The people that gave their life and their blood and their sweat, and many of, we had 5 people die that day, including a law enforcement officer that died the next day. The innocent who were there doing their job as public servants will not be forgotten. And we won't forget them here on Legal AF. Well, I've got you two big developments, 2 podcasts that I'm involved with.
Mike Johnson has chosen to say no to a bipartisan bill so he could say yes to continuing to force TSA agents to work without pay. Mike Johnson has said no to a bipartisan bill so he could say yes to continuing to inconvenience millions of the American people across the country. Mike Johnson has said no to a bipartisan bill so House Republicans could say yes to chaos at airports all across the country. Johnson has said no to a bipartisan bill so House Republicans can continue to say yes to ICE brutality. Mike Johnson has said no to a bipartisan Senate-passed bill so House Republicans can continue to say yes to ICE violence. Mike Johnson has said no to a bipartisan Senate-passed bill so House Republicans can continue to say yes to the corruption that we've seen at the Department of Homeland Security. Mike Johnson has chosen
In the wealthiest country in the world, families shouldn't be forced to choose.
Bill Maher is a lot of things: annoying, unfunny, misogynistic, Islamophobic, and of course, pro-Israel. The noted atheist is very, very pro the Jewish state, so much so that he can't stop lying in order to defend it. Here he is on Friday's episode of Real Time on HBO.
To me, what the Democrats are not doing with this is leading. The energy in their parties with the young people who learn everything about Israel on TikTok. They don't know shit. And their leaders are not standing up and saying, kids, you don't know what's going on here. Every war Israel has fought is a war of defense.
Every war, they were attacked first. The kids don't know shit, Bill? Or is that you? Time for a debunking. Let's look at Israel's wars, because Israel's fought a lot of wars. But let's just take a look at 3 of the major ones.
It's hilarious.
Someone just made over $1 million betting on minute details of the Iran war, when there would be attacks and who would attack and what would take place. They did so with 93% accuracy. How is that possible? Well, it's a little bit like this scene from the Hangover movies.
I don't think you should be doing too much gambling tonight, Alan.
Gambling? What's anything about gambling? It's not gambling when you know you're going to win. Counting cards is a foolproof system.
It's also illegal.
It's not illegal. It's frowned upon.
So how is that legal? And the short answer is it's not legal. There are a couple issues involved in what are called prediction markets. Prediction markets involve betting on future events. They were originally focused on commodities like produce, like crops. It helped essentially crowdsource expectations about whether it would be a good year for corn and what the prices would be, and what the drought conditions might be, what the market overseas might be. It was a way to help minimize risk and spread out the risk of future events involving commodities. But some companies decided this was a clever way they could get around laws prohibiting gambling by calling them contracts based on future events. So you could bet now on a future event, let's say a football game or March Madness. There were $1 billion bet on the last Super Bowl. There are already $100 million worth of events contracts on March Madness this year. This has proliferated to the point where it's ubiquitous on college campuses, with students betting on how different sports teams are going to do and what margins they might win by. It's as easy as going on your phone and placing a sports bet, or as they would call a wager on a future market or future event. This has proliferated at present in significant part because of this guy. That's Michael Selig. He's the chairman of the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. He's the only commissioner on that commission. He was appointed by Donald Trump. He has not filled, the president has not filled any of the other commissioners, so there's no check on this chairman. And he's given carte blanche to these companies to engage in all kinds of sports betting and gambling, and do so even over the objections of states where that kind of activity is prohibited. Now, he came up for confirmation before the Senate Agriculture Committee, where I serve, and I asked him his views on these prediction markets, whether it was gambling, whether it was sports betting. I asked him in the first instance whether, if you went online and you bet on the future of a Bills game, was that sports gaming? Was that sports betting? And this is what he had to say. If you and I bet on who wins the Bills game tomorrow, would you consider that gambling?
Senator, on this issue, I would look to the courts. So I would look to what the courts say about that issue, and I think it's still working its way through. So once we have an outcome and that we can interpret within the agency,
if betting on who wins or loses a football game is not gaming, is not sports gaming, what do you think sports gaming is? Can you give me an example that, okay, this is clearly gambling, sports gambling. There may be some complex questions, as you say, but okay, this is certainly sports betting. What would you say?
Speaker, 237 years ago, one of our founding fathers, John Adams, laid bare his greatest fear for our country, which is that in every assembly in Congresses like this one, members would gain influence not by sense, but by noise, not by greatness, but by meanness, not by learning, but by ignorance. Why am I quoting John Adams at 10 p.m., 10:30 on a Friday night? It's because this debate, the Judiciary Chairman's remarks, are emblematic of the reality, the cold, hard truth that John Adams fears proved precedent. All we hear is noise from the other side. The kind of noise that expects the American people to believe that a bill that passed unanimously in the United States Senate somehow defunds the police. The kind of noise that expects the American people to believe that every conservative Republican U.S. senator passed a bill last night that defunds the police. That's their argument. The bill that the Senate passed, every conservative senator and every liberal one came to a consensus that the stalemate needed to end, that TSA agents needed to be paid, that FEMA needed to be funded. They passed that bill on a unanimous basis. The only reason we're not considering it is because our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been captured by the far right wing of their party. It is shameful. We have an opportunity tonight to perhaps rise to the occasion and prove John Adams wrong. If a handful of Republicans, I'm not talking about 30 or 20 or 10, 3, vote to defeat the previous question.
I yield the gentleman additional 30 seconds.
If 3 Republicans vote to defeat the previous question, we can take up the Senate bill tonight and TSA agents will be paid. Simple. It's time for our Republican colleagues to do the right thing. Defeat this bill. I yield back.
Why can't a future Department of Justice go after Donald Trump again and test the limits of the immunity decision rendered by the Supreme Court 3 years ago? Who says they don't want an opportunity to roll it back? Just because there's a Supreme Court precedent on the books doesn't mean we can't challenge it. And I think many of the things we're watching Donald Trump do are beyond the limits of the protection of that immunity decision, and we should go back after him for it, or the future Department of Justice should. What will the future prosecutions look like against the Trump administration and its participants and impeachment proceedings? We cover it all on the Legal AF podcast, and here's a clip. Right, and so I think what that means for our audience is that come the midterms and the Democrats get the gavel, we're going to see impeachment proceedings against Pam Bondi. I mean, does anybody on this illustrious panel tonight think that Pam Bondi isn't going to be the subject of an impeachment proceeding? And maybe Donald Trump as well. For things that happen, think about this. Because we're going to talk about, are we going to talk about this one? We'll touch on. We know there's a grand conspiracy criminal investigation being conducted out of the Southern District of Florida, my backyard, by a handpicked prosecutor of Donald Trump named Jason Redding Quinones. And he's using Judge Cannon, again, 90 miles north of his home, to go run up there and get a grand jury in place. They've issued 130 subpoenas, including against James Comey, against Brennan, the former CIA director. And their working theory, since these events happened in 2016, is that the conspiracy component of it means that the statute of limitations has been recharged because things have happened in furtherance of the conspiracy in the last 5 years. All right, hold that thought for a minute. If that's true, and some of the events related to these documents and Donald Trump's use of them happened in 2023, then a 2028-ish new Department of Justice could investigate Donald Trump, I don't care how old he is at that point, for what happened in 2023, 2024, right? Before he became president. He doesn't have criminal immunity at that point by the Supreme Court. And this would extend the statute of limitations on many of these crimes. So I'm not sure Trump's out of the woods yet, because let's remember or tell our audience for the first time that he wasn't absolved in Mar-a-Lago, okay? And I don't even think it would be double jeopardy. He had his prosecutor declared to be invalidly appointed and had the indictment tossed as a result. But that doesn't mean that he was exonerated, okay? And so a new prosecutor or just the attorney general in the future, okay, without a special prosecutor, could go after Donald Trump for 2024, 2023 events. Couldn't he?
I almost think that the attorney general position in 2028 is going to be more important than even the president, because there are so many prosecutions that can go forward starting 2028.
Right, or 2029.
But,
right.
Well, and the related piece is, you know, if Trump is sharing information, secret information, super top secret information, beyond top secret, with people while he is not president, those are not the official acts of the president. You do not get immunity under the invented immunity that John Roberts created for him with the Republican appointees on the court. You cannot have immunity for acts that he committed while he was not president. I think.
Let me do a thought experiment. Let me do a thought experiment and take advantage of Lisa being with us on the panel today with her deep Supreme Court knowledge, an author of a recent book called Without Precedent. There we are. About the John Roberts court. I'm not sure that Trump's out of the woods on the immunity decision, because there's nothing to stop the Department of Justice in 2029, right, to go back after Donald Trump and test the limits of that immunity stretched to its outer boundaries, core constitutional, is taking documents and using them, maybe even now, right, as commander-in-chief. He still has them apparently, or he has access to them, you know. So I'm not so sure that the immunity decision should be such a brick wall to stop future prosecutors from testing the outer boundaries of it, and or giving the Supreme Court the opportunity to revisit the immunity decision based on some heinous conduct by Donald Trump, who doesn't give a crap about any of the lines and boundaries. He just does anything. What do you think, Lisa? Couldn't a future prosecutor test the limits and bring a case, and they'll have Donald Trump try to argue about his immunity?
Yeah, I think that could very well happen, and I actually think it should, because I think this court, the Supreme Court, should revisit that decision. It was a terrible decision, a reckless decision, an unreasoned decision in terms of our Constitution, a counter-constitutional decision. And even within the boundaries of this despicable decision, it's not limitless. There are boundaries, and I think those should be tested, because we are in an extraordinarily dangerous situation with a president who thinks that he can do no wrong, thinks that anything he does is a so-called official act or official word, and also has the power to give pardons. Again, another power that I think really needs to be revisited and examined, because no one should be able to pardon their co-conspirators, whether they're at the Justice Department or any other agency, or whether they're a high official or a lower official. The pardon power should not extend that way either, and that was implicated as well in the decision that John Roberts wrote. So I like the thought experiment. I think we're going to have to put a lot of things on the table to restore the rule of law, to restore justice, and to repair the damage that has been done, not just by Donald Trump, but also by the Roberts court. And, you know, I think any reasonable person looking at the outcome of that decision back in 2024, right before the election, would recognize that that decision is a disaster constitutionally. And maybe there are some on the court, or maybe it'll be a different court, will revisit it and say that decision, you know, is repudiated because it was so wrongheaded, and has so many problems with it. But you're right. It's not absolute. It's not unlimited. And even within the conversation or the descriptions of the power that John Roberts invented, it's not without bounds.
Yeah, and I think sorry, you can take it over to you. Okay.
Well, I was just making the point that, yes, to that point, it was only the Article 2 powers that were absolute. Official was qualified, private was not at all. And the reason why you know that some of those actions, well, at least when we're talking about January 6th, could have gone forward, is because of the private lawsuit that's still going forward. The Capitol police officers and Congress people have sued Trump, saying that those were private actions, because that speech he gave that day was paid, that rally was paid for with campaign funds. So if he had not won, that could have still been, the criminal proceeding against him could have gone forward. And we know that because Trump tried to dismiss that lawsuit saying this was official conduct, and he wasn't able to do that. And so that, you know, civil lawsuits always take a long time to move forward. So that's kind of similar working its way through the court. But it did overcome that initial motion to dismiss because there were enough facts that was actually private action that day.
And to Lisa's point, we can't, as a society, just chalk up the 4 years of the second Trump administration as just like this funny little period where really interesting things happened and ignore the impact that for the good of our rule of law in our constitutional republic, our not too distant future selves have to go back and look at what should be impeached and what should be prosecuted. Even if he tries to do mass pardons on the way out, the way he did mass pardons on the way in of all the people who committed those crimes on the Capitol on Jan 6, so what? We have to continue to make that party expend their political capital to support and protect a lawless president. And, we can't just, like I said, we can't just chalk it off to, just like the funny little period in our, in our life. And we need to move on from it, look forward, not back. No, we're gonna have to spend a fair amount of time cleaning up behind this administration, right?
Because you can just real quick, sorry,
Yeah.
just because you can argue that actually forward pardoning Nixon allowed for Trump. Because if Nixon had gotten prosecuted then, perhaps Trump would have been afraid of breaking the law. So we do have to move past somehow the president is, the deference to it. I think we certainly are. I think us as a country have a lot more willingness to prosecute.
Welcome back. We sit at the intersection of law and politics, so you don't have to, every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Iranian missiles can attack London, Israel is claiming. The British government has insisted it has no assessment of Iranian plans to strike London. On Thursday, though, the Defense Secretary refused to say if Iran has missiles that are actually capable of hitting Britain. According to the Prime Minister, Britain's not joining the war. But Sir Keir Starmer's insisted this numerous times. He said, it's not our war, and it's unpopular with the public.
While taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war.
But in reality, Britain is being dragged deeper and deeper into the Iran conflict. Here's how. When the US-Israeli attack began, Britain refused to allow the Americans to use a joint UK-US base on Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean to launch strikes on Iran. Government sources told us the Starmer government believed the attack had no lawful basis and joining would be against the national interest.
By the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, he made, for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
But within 2 days, Britain changed its position. Starmer announced the US could use British military bases for bombers en route to targeting Iranian missile sites. The Prime Minister said this was purely defensive, but critics argued that Britain was actually enabling a war it considered unlawful. In the past few weeks, American bombers have been landing in Gloucestershire at the RAF Fairford base. These bombers take off from England, fly to the Middle East, carry out their bombing missions over Iran, and return to Gloucestershire. Starmer's now in a difficult position. He railed against the idea of becoming more involved in the conflict. For 2 weeks, he attacked Reform leader Nigel Farage and Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch for having backed Britain joining the war. But late last week, the government did a U-turn. Starmer said Britain would allow the US to use British bases to launch strikes on Iranian sites to help protect ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Again, he said this was a defensive measure.
Actually intercepting strikes to stop them hitting people and buildings. So that's defensive action.
Iran disagrees. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Sayed Abbas Araghchi, spoke to the British Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, over the phone. He accused the Brits of participating in aggression. In response, Cooper warned Iran against targeting UK bases, territory, or interests directly. Now, Britain is feeling more vulnerable than ever.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Let me begin by saying it is not Bernie, it is you. It's all of us together. Let me thank DSA for inviting me to be with you. Let me thank our brothers and sisters in the trade union movement for being here. And our progressive elected officials as well. And I suspect that many of you were out yesterday on the No King's Day. As I understand it, more people were out demonstrating yesterday than at any time in the history of the United States of America. I was in St. Paul, Minneapolis area, 150,000 people. And all across this country, the American people are saying no to authoritarianism, no to oligarchy, and no to the continued attack against the American working class. And I want to just mention something else while I'm here. I hope all of you understand that the work that you did to elect Zoran as mayor will not only impact this city, it will not only impact this country, it is reverberating all over the world. Wherever I go and speak in this country, and I mentioned what you guys did here in New York City, people erupt. You have given America hope. Thank you for what you did. You showed this country and literally people all over the world that despite all of the money and all of the power of the oligarchs, people knocking on doors, ordinary people, to take them on and defeat them. You did it. Thank you. I think all of you know, and I say this with a bit of pain in my heart for the young people, that we are living in crazy times. We really are. And if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, you're not alone. What we are looking at now is not only Trumpism and authoritarianism. We are looking at oligarchy. We are looking at the crisis in climate. And by the way, we are looking at oligarchs like Musk and Bezos pushing an AI and robotics, which will be disastrous for the working class of this country. So there is a lot that is going on. But today, what I am going to focus on is one issue that does not get the attention that it deserves. Not getting the attention in Congress, doesn't get the attention in the corporate media. And that is the enormous level of income and wealth
Put him in
inequality
retirement.
that exists in
How
America
many times
today.
has dipshit Donald Duck fell asleep on live TV just this past month? Get the fuck out of here with that
Now, we
shit.
don't hear much discussion in Congress because too many of the people there have been bought by the powerful special interests who paid for their campaigns. And we don't hear too much of it in the media because the corporate media is owned by a small number of billionaires. But amazingly enough, the American people are catching on. And they know that never before in American history have so few people held so much wealth and so much power. They understand in New York, Vermont, and all over this country that never before has there been such extreme levels of income and wealth inequality. We all studied the Gilded Age. Remember that? Rockefeller and Carnegie, all those guys. Much worse right now. Never before in American history have we seen such concentration of ownership. You got a handful of giant corporations owning one sector of the economy after the other. Never before in American history have we seen a ruling class within a corrupt campaign finance system make the enormous amounts of campaign contributions they are making today. You know, we talk about living in a democracy, but you tell me if you're living in a democracy when Elon Musk can spend $290 million to elect Trump as president. And right now in these midterms, these oligarchs are going to spend many, many hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, in their super PACs. That's power. And never before in American history have we seen the kind of greed, arrogance, and irresponsibility that we are seeing today in the billionaire class. A class which increasingly sees themselves not as citizens, not as part of a democratic society, but like the monarchs of ages past, an elite with a God-given right to rule. And if you read what some of these guys are saying, they're pretty open about it. They believe that they are a separate breed. And how dare you, the American people, challenge them? I want to just say a few words about where I perceive us to be today economically in this country. And again, you're not going to see this in the corporate media, and you're certainly not going to hear it discussed terribly much in the Congress. Right now, and I want you all to take this in, right now you are living in a country where the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%. Listen to this. I mean, this is really amazing, but it tells you, I mean, what goes on in America, that we are not discussing this on the front pages of papers every single day. One man, one person, Mr. Musk, owns more wealth than the bottom 53% of American households.
That is insane. There's nobody, maybe except Mr. Musk, who thinks that that vaguely makes sense. Today, the CEOs of large, profitable corporations now make 350 times more than their average worker. Now, it always used to be, nothing new, obviously, the guys who own the companies make more money than workers. It's always been the case. Used to be 20 times more, 50 times more, now 350 times more. And it's not just that reality of the gap between the people on top and everybody else is getting wider. Last year alone, listen to this, after receiving the largest tax break in history from Donald Trump, the ugly, beautiful bill, 938 billionaires, that's what there are in America. All of 938 people, not a lot of people. That's half of what we have right here today. All right, 938 billionaires became $1.5 trillion richer. In New York City, right here, the top 1% earns 44% of all income. Got it? Top 1% earns 44% of income, which means that the bottom 99% share 56% of all income. 1 out of every 4 residents in this great city is living in poverty. Bottom line, the richest people in America have never, ever had it so good. So that is one reality, one economic reality as to what's happening in America. But as everybody in this room knows, as our brothers and sisters in the trade union movement knows, working people all over this country know, there is another reality. And that reality is that the working class of America is being decimated and has been under attack for many, many years. I want you to hear this because it's important to put this in a broader context. Over the last many decades, as you all know, there has been an explosion in technology. What that means is that every worker here produces more than that worker did 40, 50 years ago. You're more productive. Despite that reality, the average American worker is making about $20 a week less today than he or she did 53 years ago after adjusting for inflation. So you understand what I'm talking about. According to the Rand Corporation, not exactly a socialist institution, over the last 50 years, $79 trillion in wealth has been redistributed from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. $79 trillion. Now, if you allow me, I'll give you a personal example. What I'm trying to say here is what's been going on over the last 50, 60 years. My dad worked hard, but he just never made much money. And we lived, as did many other people in the Flatbush neighborhood, in a rent-controlled apartment. Now, I want to just take us back to when I was a kid, a few years ago. When I was growing up, living in a rent-controlled apartment, my brother and I class families, you know today, where mom wants to stay home, she's able to do so. So what you're seeing now is people are working harder and harder and living under extraordinary stress. I'm not going to tell you that in my family, my parents didn't fight about money, didn't have that money. But I suspect that the stress that we experienced then was much less than the stress that working class families are experiencing today. So what the hell has happened? Why have we gone backwards? We should be going forwards, not backwards. Bottom line, the American economy today is clearly not working for workers. While the very richest people in our country become richer, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. I don't have to explain to anybody in this room what paycheck to paycheck is about, correct? All right, I grew up in that family. Many of you are doing that right now. People are struggling to pay the rents, struggling to buy a home, afford health care, prescription drugs. People cannot afford groceries, cannot afford the very basic necessities of life in the richest country in the history of the world. From a GDP perspective, we are living in the richest country on earth. That's the good news. The bad news is that despite that, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, and the highest rate of senior poverty of almost any major country. Nearly half of older workers, I want you to hear this, nearly half of older workers have nothing saved for retirement. All right, you're 65 years of age, you've worked your whole life, you got nothing in the bank to rely on when you retire. Unbelievably, over 20% of our seniors are trying to make it on less than $15,000 a year. How in hell does anybody, let alone a senior, survive on $15,000 a year? And then on top of all of that, unless we change the nature of this economy, which is what we are intending to do, our younger generation will have a lower standard of living than their parents. We will not allow that to happen. All right, but it's not only the income and wealth inequality numbers that are disgraceful. We as a nation right now, despite spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as the people of any other nation, we have 85 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. Over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt each year because of medically related debt. Tens of thousands of our people die every year because they don't have enough money to get to a doctor when they should in the richest country in the history of the world. And why is all of that happening? Why is it that in a nation of extraordinary wealth, of exploding technology and greatly increased worker productivity, why are so many people struggling just to stay alive? Well, there are a number of reasons, but a major one is that we have a tax code that is totally rigged. A tax code that has, by and large, been written by lobbyists for the wealthy to benefit the wealthy. In 2006, Warren Buffett famously said, quote, "There's class warfare, all right, but it is my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we are winning." End of quote. Mr. Buffett went on to say that he, a multi-billionaire, pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. Got that? What Buffett said was true 20 years ago. It's even more accurate today. In America, right now, billionaires pay a lower effective tax rate than the average worker. A few years ago, it was estimated that Elon Musk, the wealthiest man alive, paid an effective tax rate of less than 3.3%, while the average truck driver in America paid an effective tax rate of 8.4%. Jeff Bezos, the fourth wealthiest man alive, paid an effective tax rate of less than 1%, while the average firefighter in America paid a tax rate of 8.7%. Michael Bloomberg, the wealthiest man in New York, worth over $100 billion, paid an effective tax rate of just 1.3%, while the average registered nurse in America paid a tax rate of 13.3%. Oh, and Mr. Buffett, his tax rate was just 0.1%. And the billionaires are complaining about how they are overtaxed. But it's not just billionaires who are not paying their fair share of taxes. In a given year, large corporations that make billions in profits have paid zero in federal taxes, federal income taxes. In fact, last year, after Trump gave corporate America a $900 billion tax break, Tesla, SpaceX, Palantir, and Ticketmaster paid zero in federal income taxes. How's that? These companies are worth $2.7 trillion combined. Their owners are worth over $880 billion. They made $15 billion in profits last year, and they paid zero in federal income taxes. So, let me make you ready for an extraordinarily radical statement. It is so radical that the vast majority of the American people agree with us. And that is that the time is long overdue for profitable corporations and the wealthiest people in our country to start paying their fair share of taxes. That is true in California, where our union brothers and sisters are working on a tax on billionaires. It is true here in New York City, and it is true nationally. Recent polling tells us that over 60% of Americans say tax rates on large businesses and corporations should be raised, and almost 60% say tax rates on household incomes over $400,000 should be raised. And that is what the mayor of New York City is fighting for. Along with people all over this country, in New York State and here in New York City, the American people are demanding a tax system which is progressive, which is fair, and demands those people who have the most, start paying their fair share. Mayor Mamdani has proposed a surtax of 2 percentage points on New York City millionaires. That is 0.7% of total city tax base, fewer than 1%, which would generate approximately $3 billion annually. So let us be clear, under the mayor's proposal, 99.3% of people in New York City would not pay a nickel more in taxes. Is what the mayor is proposing popular? You're damn right. The widely respected pollsters at Siena just a few weeks ago, found that 54% of New York State voters approve of Mayor Mamdani's proposed tax increase, only 29% opposed, and the numbers were much higher in New York City. And today I would ask Governor Hochul, listen to where the people are at. The people of this city, the people of the state, the people of this country do not want to see our kids go hungry, do not want to see people sleep out on the street, lack health care. They want the very rich to start paying their fair share of taxes. And I would hope that the governor joins the vast majority of the people who want to see that happen. So what we are seeing in the midst of this massive income and wealth inequality, in the midst of the insatiable greed of the billionaire class, you're seeing people demanding tax justice. And that is why I recently introduced a bill that would establish a 5% wealth tax on 938 billionaires in America. And 938 billionaires constitute 0.00003% of the population. Over a 10-year period, I want to explain, to show you the kind of income and wealth inequality that exists, what this bill would do. It would raise $4.4 trillion over a 10-year period, all right? What would we be able to do with this bill that applies to less than 1,000 people in America? This is what we could do just with that legislation. What we could do in the first year, we would provide every man, woman, and child in a household making $150,000 or less, the vast majority of people, a $3,000 direct payment. $12,000 for a family of four. Okay? And at a time when gas prices and food prices and everything else is going up, that would be a real help to millions and millions of families. All right? That's one thing we do with the bill. The other thing we do is, oh, by the way, we would have enough money to end homelessness in America. We would have enough money not only to end homelessness, but to end the housing crisis by building 7 million units of low-income and affordable housing and apartments. And remember, this is a tax on fewer than 1,000 people, half the people who are here. Further, we would be able to expand Medicare to cover dental, vision, and hearing. But that's not all. We would provide universal childcare, not just in New York, as Mayor Mamdani is doing, but throughout America. We would strengthen public education and attract the best and the brightest into teaching by making sure that no educator in America makes less than $60,000 a year. You got some teachers there, right? All right. Thank you.
I would be living like a king on 40, 50 grand a year.
All of you know that we have a major crisis in home health care. People need folks to come in and help them when they're older or when they're disabled. Our legislation would guarantee that seniors and people with disabilities receive the home health care they need through Medicaid. All of you know in this disgusting, big, beautiful bill, Trump and his friends threw 15 million Americans off of their health care in order to provide a $1 trillion tax break for the 1%. Our legislation repeals those health care cuts and makes certain that none of those 15 million people lose their health care. In other words, we provide all of this help to tens and tens of millions of children, elderly, working class people, people who are sick. And we do that by simply imposing a reasonable tax on fewer than 1,000 people. And to tell you how crazy and how absurd the current situation is, if this legislation had been enacted last year, this radical piece of legislation, Elon Musk would have owed $42 billion in taxes, leaving him, poor Elon, that's got to have a lot of compassion for the guy, leaving him with just $792 billion to survive. I mean, you see the price of gas, how are you going to make it on $792 billion? I mean, we're really just going after this guy in a cruel and ruthless way. Mark Zuckerberg would have owed, under this bill, $11 billion in taxes, leaving him with a meager $209 billion to feed his family. That's right. I mean, very easy. You try to survive on $209 billion. Price of food, you kidding me? Mr. Bezos also would have owed about $11 billion in taxes, leaving him with a mere $207 billion to buy a couple of other mansions or jet planes or whatever he does with his money. What's the point? The point that I am making here, just to give you a tiny example. we can transform and improve life for tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars and barely make a dent on the kind of money these multi-billionaires have. And that is exactly what we've got to do.
Imagine burning fucking one presidency. Holy shit.
Let me be honest and tell you something that really bothers me about this whole business that we're discussing. Now, I can understand. You can understand to disagree with them. But I can understand that billionaires don't want to pay more taxes. I got it. I can understand that they're more interested in buying another yacht for a few $100 million or buying their fifth mansion or another private island than worrying about the needs of hungry kids or struggling working class families. I get that. I understand that. But what really bothers me, I want you to think about this for a moment, is that instead of being honest about where they're coming from, instead of going forward and making the case, now there's always two sides, so they can make the case why they think it's appropriate that so few have so much, the why people sleep out on the streets and they buy 5 mansions. Let them make that case. But what bothers me is what they are saying to the American people is that if you want justice, if you want fairness, and if you use the democratic process to bring that about, if you are successful in bringing about real tax reform and having the rich pay their fair share, what they are saying is we, the oligarchs, will punish you if you do that. They are extortionists, and what they are saying, if you are successful, California is successful, we the billionaires are going to leave California. New York City is successful raising taxes, we're going to leave New York City. In America, if we raise taxes, we're all going to go to billionaires, we'll go to Saudi Arabia and be with their fellow autocrats and oligarchs over there. All right. So what they are saying is, heads they win, tails you lose. What they are saying in so many words is they don't believe in democracy. They're saying that they, as oligarchs, have the wealth, they have the power, and that no matter what you do, you're going to lose. Nothing you can do about it. That's what these guys are saying, and I really regard that as quite disgusting. You know, they're not playing by the rules. They have the power. They can move their companies out. Brothers and sisters, as you may remember, way back in 1933, Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis made a very profound statement. He said, quote, "We can have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we cannot have both." What Brandeis said was true 93 years ago. It is even more accurate today. Our job right now in this extraordinarily difficult moment in American history is to tell the oligarchs we will no longer tolerate their insatiable greed. They want to leave America and go to Saudi Arabia or wherever they want to go, let them go. But this is a country that belongs to the working families of America and not just a handful of billionaires. This city, you, the people in the city, showed the oligarchs that when we stand together, when 90,000 people are prepared to go out and knock on doors, we can elect a city government that stands for working people. And right now, our job is to take that message all across this country. Too many people have fought and died for democracy. We're not going to have an authoritarian government. Too many working class families are struggling just to survive right now. We are going to have an economy that works for all, not just us and Bezos and the 1%. So brothers and sisters, let us go forward together. Let us have progressive taxation here in New York and all across this country. Let's create an economy that works for all of us. Thank you very much.